Proverbs 1:7 reveals that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So, if you want to be smart about things that really matter, like the purpose of life, for example, that knowledge begins with a reverential awe or submissive fear of God.
That's right, yeah. The fear of the Lord is a state of mind in which your attitudes, your will, your feelings, your deeds, and goals are exchanged for God's. But before that can ever get going in your life, you have to realize that God exists, right? As it says in Hebrews 11:6, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him.
You know, the Bible begins with the statement, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So God's existence is assumed to be self-evident.
Right.
But what about the opposite of that? Well, in Psalms 14:1, we're told that the fool has said in his heart, there's no God. They acted corruptly. They have done abominable works. There is none who does good.
Now here we see that the Bible connects corrupt thoughts about God, especially denying his very existence, with corrupt morals. And that makes sense. If there's no God, there's no creator to set the rules, then we're set adrift morally. When the children of Israel, for example, forgot their creator in the times of the judges, when they had no one leading them in being faithful to God, what happened? Every man did that which was right in his own eyes, as we read in Judges 21, and chaos reigned.
Right. You know, and we see the same thing happening today. Countries where the people once honored God, recognizing that God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself, as it says in 2 Corinthians 5:19, those countries experience unprecedented security and prosperity.
Right.
But those same countries today are crumbling as people turn their backs on God. You know, Proverbs 14:34 says, righteousness lifts up a nation, but sin is a shame to any people.
Yeah, as nations turn their backs on God, living as though he doesn't exist, sin abounds. There's political corruption, there's lying, there's slander, there's public displays of debauchery, there's violent crime is on the increase, abortion, theft, adultery, drugs, drunkenness, gambling, greed of all kinds, and then economic pressures follow as taxes increase and governments borrow more money to pay for bigger and bigger police forces and jails and social security system to try to patch up the problems.
You know, underpinning this abandonment and faith in God is the widespread acceptance of evolutionary thinking.
Right, yeah.
You know, that everything made itself by natural processes and that God is not necessary. Now, those who hold this view will often admit there is design, but they insist that there's no designer. They argue that the design thing designed itself.
Yeah, right. And this thinking where the plain as day evidence for God's existence is explained away, it naturally leads to atheism, which is a belief that God doesn't exist, and secular humanism, which is a belief that man can chart his own course without God. And this type of thinking is popular in universities today and in governments as well.
Yes, some of the greatest evil ever seen has been committed by those who've adopted an evolutionary approach to morality.
Yeah.
Lenin, Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, there's just a few. You know, the atheistic evolutionist Sir Arthur Keith recognized the connection between atheism, evolution, and morality. Commenting on Hitler, he wrote that the German Führer is an evolutionist. He has consciously sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution.
Yeah, many millions have suffered terribly and lost lives because of this atheistic way of thinking at that high level. Atheism kills because without God, there's no rules. Anything goes. Atheists are at the forefront of efforts to try to legitimize abortion, euthanasia, drug-taking, prostitution, pornography, and promiscuity. All of these things cause misery, suffering, and death. Atheism is a philosophy of death.
Yeah, now atheists love to point to atrocities committed by supposed Christians. The Crusades and Northern Ireland are favorites. But if the people committing these terrible deeds were indeed Christians, they were being inconsistent with their own standard of morality.
Right.
Do not murder, love your enemies. But Stalin, for example, was being consistent with his because being an atheist, after reading Darwin, he had no objective basis for any standard of morality.
That's right. Yeah, Christianity says God is love. Love one another. Love your enemies. That kind of love is it's self-sacrificing. And consequently, Christians have been at the forefront in helping the sick, looking after orphans and the elderly, and feeding the hungry, educating the poor, opposing exploitation through things like child labor and slavery, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but atheism, with its evolutionary foundation, says love is nothing more than self-interest in increasing the chances of our genes surviving in our offspring or our close relatives.
Right.
In the struggle for survival of the fittest, where's the basis for compassion?
Yeah.
And not only is atheism destructive, it's logically flawed at its very roots, because there must be a creator.